Anyway, welcome everybody. You're welcome, Anna, to the uh, you typing and everything, but anyway, no worries. We can just go ahead.
Okay.
People can, well, they can actually look at the Friends Video Project video you did a few weeks ago to see you in action.
Here we go.
So let's just start with my usual kind of questions about where are you from, and maybe you could tell us your musical training, your influence.
Yeah. So I am originally from the Midwestern U.S. But spent a large part of my life, though, growing up in the southeastern part of the U.S. And I'm currently in Alabama, where I am teaching at the University of Alabama on the piano faculty. I teach applied piano and piano pedagogy for undergraduate and graduate piano students, and I teach piano ensemble and music appreciation, and I have a studio of pre-college students, so I do a lot of different fun things like that.
What city is that in?
It is in Tuscaloosa, which is about an hour from Birmingham.
Okay, I've never been in that part of the world, but
yeah, it's a great place. But you know, I did probably the typical, started piano around age 7, took lessons for a little while. I actually didn't take in high school. I kind of quit, and for various reasons, just decided that music wasn't for me anymore, and didn't want to play piano, didn't want to touch the piano, was done with it all. I thought I would go into like a STEM field or something like that. But I ended up kind of happenstance coming back to it in college for a piano major, and just fell in love with the instrument, and kind of went through degrees one at a time, did my bachelor's, took a few gap years, got my feet wet, went back to school, and then took some more gap years, and then went back for my DMA. I went to the University of Oklahoma, where I did a degree in piano performance and pedagogy. And I just finished that in December of 2021. So I'm really happy for that to be done. So, yeah.
So much of that degree was during the pandemic.
It was, and it did kind of, yeah, I had to do some workarounds on all of even my Kirk research, because it didn't make it very easy when libraries were closed and everything. But, you know, it got done, thankfully, so.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear more about that doctoral time, and like, at what point did you decide to really delve into Helen Kirk?
Yeah, so I guess a little background. In my master's degree, I had a history class in American music, and got really interested in what's known as the Second New England School of Composers, like the first generation of American serious composers, people like Amy Beach and Edward McDowell, and how that all got started here in the US. And so when I was in my doctoral degree in summer of 2020, we had nothing else to do. So I was studying for my doctoral comprehensive exams. And I was doing a research project on this group of composers, and I found the name of Helen Kirk, and I went, who in the world is this person? Because I've never heard her before. And I just started doing a little bit of digging, and I found a few recordings of her music, and I was really attracted to it, some of the Scottish flavors with the French flavors and romantic flavors, and I realized that no one had written on it, and so I was looking for a dissertation topic. And so I started on a quest to kind of track down more of her music and explore more, and the more I learned, the more I realized what an important figure she was in music history and American music history, and it kind of led me to research. I knew that there were kind of biases against women in the 19th century, especially as composers, but I hadn't really spent a lot of time looking into the details of that. I just, knew of Clara Schumann and Fanny Mendelssohn, and that was about it. So then the more I learned about the the culture of being a female composer in that time, it made me even more impressed at what Hope Kirk did. And then I finally got to go to the Library of Congress after a year of working on Hope Kirk. I finally got to go to the Library of Congress. It had been closed with the pandemic, so I went as soon as it reopened. And that is where the Helen Hope Kirk collection is housed. So I got to look at all the primary materials and scrapbooks of concert programs and handwritten stuff that she had done. It was so cool. And there were concert reviews of everything, all the performances that Hope Kirk played, and it included reviews of the music that she did. And, you know, it was interesting to me how the critics were both laudatory of the music in terms of the quality, but also critical on the grounds of her being a woman. So it kind of motivated me to make bringing Hope Kirk's music alive one of my missions right now as a pianist and a researcher.
Fantastic. How long did you spend in the Library of Congress there?
I got to spend about a week there. They had limited hours because they had just reopened with COVID, so I could go for 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the evening or afternoon for 5 days, and it was really cool to handle all of the original stuff from the 1800s and 1900s.
So great. I mean, I had a little glimpse of that kind of thing in the national, like whatever it's called, in Vienna. Just like to be in that space and just there and look at the stuff.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, there's a bit online here and there, but and I have looked at the Library of Congress online and seen, wow, there's so much Helen Hope Kirk there. I'm totally jealous. That's fantastic that you got to do that.
It was a really special time. It was definitely the highlight of my dissertation research and work. So
yeah, it's such an important thing to be able to do. So is there something specific that kindled your interest in her? She was a superstar and has been overlooked.
I found her life story fascinating. How she got from Europe, how she came to the U.S., what she did, and I went. A lot of it was a realization that we spend a lot of time as pianists. We probably, if we think about American female composers, we're probably going to name somebody like Amy Beach. And yet Hope Kirk had so many similarities to Amy Beach, had a stellar concert career. Amy Beach and Hope Kirk both performed their own piano concerto the same year. They were tied essentially for being the first American woman to write piano concertos. There's so many similarities in what they did. And I thought, well, why do we not know any of these other women besides Amy Beach?
Oh, so this is something I mentioned a few weeks ago when Jean Uras about Mel. I suggested that we should have an opera Mel. So then what if we had an opera called Kirk instead, or also? And so what would you put in that opera? Like what story, even piece of music, what would you include in the Hope Kirk, which I'm sure someone's going to write now?
Ooh, I'll have to pick my favorites. Early in her life, I would say she studied in Scotland, then she studied in Germany, and after she finished her studies in Germany, she launched her concert career. So during that time, as a young touring musician, she got to meet a lot of the really great, if you think in my mind, the romantic greats of the 1870s to 1880s, like Edvard Grieg and Clara Schumann and Anton Rubinstein, and Liszt was her idol, and she, so excited when she got to meet him. She wrote that Clara Schumann invited Hope Kirk to sit next to her when she practiced. I was like, that must have been so special. She got to play for Anton Rubinstein. So that would be, definitely a highlight, I think, of her getting started.
And that's Leipzig?
Go ahead, sorry.
So the part where she was in Germany was mainly Leipzig?
Yes. mainly in Leipzig, and then she toured, and she spent some time back in London after graduating from the conservatory there in Leipzig.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I was just thinking like that place where you'd meet Grieg and Schumann. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then next thing that I'll probably include, after she had toured for a while in around 30-ish in her life, age 30, she decided that she wanted to go study some more. And so she went to Germany. She was hoping to study with Liszt, but he had just passed away. It was 1886. And so she ended up in Vienna with Theodor Leschetizky. And
for her.
I know, such a terrible happening. But Leschetizky esteemed her really highly and praised Hopkirk as the finest woman musician that he had ever known at that time. So that definitely a highlight. I mean, Leschetizky, it's not like he didn't know anyone. So I think that's worthy of mentioning. I would say the fact of, I mentioned a little bit of this before, in the 1890s when she premiered her early compositions like her Violin Sonata and her piano concerto, I think those are really notable because they were large-scale works, and it wasn't acceptable for women in America to write those sorts of things at the time because of this concept of sexual aesthetics, which believed that there was masculine music and there's feminine music, and feminine music was supposed to be small music like songs and piano music, and women were intellectually incapable of writing stuff like concertos and symphonies and sonatas. And so Hopkirk, along with people like Amy Beach, were some of the first women to challenge that notion in the US and to perform and write these works. And so that's part of what got me interested in Hopkirk's significance early on, just as a composer. Something that really shaped her life was when she was about 40, her husband had a traffic accident. And we haven't talked about her husband too much yet. He was really supportive of her concert career, but that forced her to look for different employment. So that's what formally brought her to the US. And she joined the New England Conservatory faculty there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, when I think of her, I think of that support that she had from her husband. Like, that's quite unusual in a way. Most women composers, I think, faced quite a bit of trouble to be an artist or to be a composer. But she had that from him, but only until age 40. So yeah, I hadn't realized it was so early that he.
Yeah, and he still supported her after that time. As a husband support, not financially, but supported what she was doing. But he had less ability. It forced Hopkirk to be the sole financial provider, and so it forced her to kind of rethink: am I composing and performing just because that's what I do well? Am I composing and performing and teaching because, out of economic necessity, essentially? But yeah, Hopkirk's husband was her concert manager and toured around with her. And what I thought it was fascinating, I read a letter that her husband wrote when I was at the Library of Congress to someone, just specifically stating that she's supposed to be known as Madame Helen Hopkirk after her marriage. Like not that Amy Beach took her husband's maiden name, but her Hopkirk's husband was William Wilson. He was like, she's not going to be known as Helen Wilson, she's going to be known as Helen Hopkirk. So he's very supportive of what she did.
That's pretty forward thinking at that point, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So what was his career?
He was a businessman. He was sort of an amateur painter and an amateur music critic, but primarily in the field of business. It was there's not a lot of detailed information about what he did as a career at this point. His career definitely didn't take the forefront in their marriage. There isn't a lot of talk about his business pursuits and that sort of thing. He really prioritized a lot of what his wife did in that regard.
Yeah, that was a good lucky to have her life at that point. but of course, yeah, that was tragic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, more focused on being a teacher once she made that choice to sort of stay put in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
Played, or
Did she keep playing?
yeah.
Yeah, she did. She played as faculty at the New England Conservatory, and then she kept performing mostly in the U.S. She still toured a good bit. She played her first premiere as a young pianist was when she graduated the Leipzig Conservatory in 1878, and her last public performance, was in 1939, just shy of her 83rd birthday. So she was a powerhouse. And I saw some of her concert programs from, the 1920s, 1930s, when she would have been in her 70s, and just, big pieces. She didn't shy away from it at all.
Wow, incredible.
Yeah.
So yeah, so like the performer side of her was maybe more her main expression, but was obviously also important, and obviously composing. Did you come across music that she was composing for levels, like for students, or is it more kind of concert level?
I would say, there's nothing there's certainly nothing elementary, not really anything intermediate in her output. She was first and foremost in her early life, especially a concert pianist. And so a lot of what she wrote was for her own performance, and not even just in her solo piano music, but her piano concertos and her chamber music and her songs. Pretty much everything that she wrote had a pretty significant piano part in it. Her pieces are not all necessarily going to be Liszt transcendental etude type difficulty, but they're very, very substantial. I leveled them in my dissertation based on a leveling system that was developed by Jane McGraw, and in that leveling system, the easiest pieces were like a level 8 going to level 9, 10, and above, which is what I call the artist level. So it definitely early advanced to advanced music, pretty much.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I was kind of hoping that maybe there was also something available for the earlier levels. So can you give us kind of in broad strokes, overview of her piano oeuvre?
Yeah. So in total, if you count all of her pieces individually, all of her published works, there's about 40 total pieces, and most of those are grouped into either character sets of character pieces, or neoclassical dance suites. So on the big picture, she wrote 2 dance suites. She wrote 2 sets of concert arrangements of Scottish folk melodies, which are some of my favorites. She wrote a few sets of other character pieces, a lot of them inspired by Scottish themes. And then about 6 or so individual single movement character pieces. So she wrote several sets. She wouldn't always perform all of her sets in their entirety. She would sometimes even mix and match from different sets. So I think as a performer now who's programming Hope Kirk's music, or for us teaching it, there's some license and some leeway that we can do a little bit of mix and matching to make good programming decisions. But yeah, that's the big picture.
Okay, amazing. And then you've also mentioned her Violin Sonata, her piano concerto. Are there other significant pieces?
Yeah, so she wrote. She ended up writing 2 violin sonatas. Both of them are unpublished. Their manuscripts are in the Library of Congress. That's hopefully one of my next projects when I get time. She wrote a piano concerto, which the score unfortunately is lost right now. But she also wrote a Concertstück for piano and orchestra, a concert piece for piano and orchestra, and that is more available. The score, if you're interested. She's during her lifetime, and probably her best known work even today, she was known for her songs. Yeah, and she wrote she made a collection of 70 Scottish folk songs, which is still in print by Dover Publications. That's probably one of the only things of hers that's still easily accessible in terms of being in print. But that was one thing she was very well known for during her day.
Right. Okay. And this Concertstück, you say it's sort of available, like it's published?
It's not published per se. There was a person who wrote sort of the pioneering dissertation on Helen Kirk in, I think it was 1995, who made a critical edition of the Concertstück. So it's not as easy to access as being published, but it is out there for perusal, and I have dabbled at trying to read through some of it. It's hard.
Yeah. Oh, it's always this. It's always this. Where are the scores? The songs, I don't remember how many songs she wrote, but I've heard some of them and they're just fantastic. What's the fellow's name? Steigerwald?
Yeah. Gary Steigerwald. I reached out to him initially, actually, when I started looking into Kirk, because it was summer 2020 and I couldn't get anything. So right. He was really helpful in sharing some of Hope's scores with me. But yes, I know he's done some work on that.
Yeah, there was even a concert, I think, put on with the Library of Congress. It's online somewhere on YouTube, at least.
Yeah.
Gorgeous. So, do you have sort of a special connection with any of those pieces in particular?
I would say I would probably pick a couple. The first piece of Hope Kirk's that I heard that really grabbed my attention was a set of character pieces called Iona Memories, which is based on visits that Hope Kirk spent, summers she spent in Scotland, especially in the Scottish Hebrides. And so it's based on Scottish styles or reminiscent of different things. The scores for that are really tricky to find, unfortunately. But it's a great set, and I hope to make it more accessible soon. What I've been spending a lot of time with recently are her folk song arrangements. They're just the melodies are beautiful because they're authentic Scottish melodies, so they're very singable. They've been around for literally centuries, and they have some impressionist flavors because Hope Kirk was a huge Debussy fan, so they're really fun. Again, the scores for those, I got one on interlibrary loan, and you can get it at the Library of Congress. But I'm working on that as well. Lately, I'm performing this next week. There's an unpublished waltz, one waltz that she wrote, and it's the most Chopin-esque of her pieces. Everybody that I've played it for currently loves it. It was written between 1915 and 1920 for a Polish pianist friend of Hope Kirk. So it's again a great work. Also trying to make that more accessible in the future too. So
it sounds like you have a vision or a plan to like get things published. For a publishing company kind of thing.
You cut out just a little bit. I am looking. Definitely, I'm trying to explore my options right now. I have limited time, kind of being in a full-time academic job, so it's going to be a summer project. But I'm hoping to find a way to get the music published or somehow accessible to the public.
So great! Oh, thank you, please. I just thought you could have a nice Helen Kirk Publishing Company.
Maybe we should. I just, it feels terrible to know about this person and to get to share about who she did and what she did and who she was, and not have a means of, accessing her music. It bugs me.
Yeah, totally. I mean, on those two things from the suite, the Lumiere first album, and like, where are the rest in that suite? Like they're not there on I Must Be. Have you come across the rest?
So I have all of Hope Kirk's published piano music. Either stuff that a few were sent to me by Gary Steigerwalt. I've tried to track down scores for the rest in different sources. I would say that there's so my favorites of her pieces, at least the ones that I've currently been spending time with, like the folk song arrangements and Iona Memories and such, those have been the hardest. So there's not really a good resource for those scores. But there's a wonderful collection on the Hatha Trust Digital Library, which is kind of like MSLP, but has a bunch of stuff. There is the file is labeled 5 portraits for piano, but under there is the 5 portraits, but also her other dance suite called the Serenata Suite, a set of 2 compositions for piano that she wrote in 1924, and several other pieces. I don't remember, it's maybe 60 or 80 pages in the document. So it's completely accessible online in the public domain on the internet. You can Google Hope, or search Hope Kirk in the Hatha Trust library and find some scores there. Those are easy to access.
Thank you. So yeah, and otherwise just take a week at
Mm-hmm.
any Helen Hope Kirk Foundation?
There is not, to the best of my knowledge, really the only person that has spent time with Hope Kirk outside of my research and a little bit of research done by music librarians at the Library of Congress is Gary Steigerwalt, who has written a really outstanding biographical article and produced a really helpful album, including some of Hope Kirk's music. So that's definitely a great resource, but there is no, foundation or anything like that for Hope Kirk. It seems to be kind of a forgotten area right now. So.
Well, that's be changing. Thanks to Hannah Roberts. I was thinking, like, when I was in Scotland, just pre-pandemic, I did a concert there, and included Helen Hope Kirk because hello, she's from here, and nobody in the audience was familiar with her, even though she was born in Edinburgh. So I guess there's much going on in Scotland to promote her.
Yeah.
They might want to claim her as well.
Yeah, I was surprised. I was interested because when I came here to the University of Alabama last year, we have a doctoral student who's here studying from Scotland, and I was like, have you ever heard of Helen Hope Kirk? No, never heard of her. And he's, had a concert career in that area, and so it doesn't. I think part of the perhaps reason for her being forgotten is that she just composed, apart from the fact that she was a woman, which obviously influenced things, she composed at a time, most of her piano music was written between 1900 and 1930, and if you think about what was going on in the musical scene, everything was becoming so forward looking that Hope Kirk embraced Impressionism, but there were so many forward moving trends that romantic-esque composers like Hope Kirk, I think, were quickly forgotten in the past, and if no one really cared enough to keep their music alive, they just got set aside. It's part of what I felt.
That's a great point. Yeah, that makes sense. I also think about composers that were born in the latter half of the 19th century, like it seems like a very difficult generation to find scores for. Um, and I just have this theory, it's just my little theory. There was so much turmoil, First World War, and then obviously World War and everything going on in between. And then maybe a backlash against suffragette movement. So like, uh, what happened to their scores? Like there was turmoil, there was so much movement around the globe, and also kind of an erasure situation.
Yeah, no, I think that definitely. I mean, the World Wars definitely influenced even what Hope Kirk did, and she tried even going back to Scotland after World War One. So I wonder if that, when in transitioning between Boston and Scotland and then coming back to Boston, what happened to some of maybe her scores from then? It's just like you say, it was such a time of turmoil and different things happening. And Hope Kirk didn't really, she never had children, so she knowing where her scores and what the estate is like now is a little tricky because there's not really 100 years later trying to track down relatives and where is this stuff.
Right. Yeah. And I guess in a tumultuous time, especially if you're moving the ocean, I happen to know because I have moved across the ocean back and forth a few times. Like, just don't prioritize saving things. Even if it's your compositions and they're worthy, like you can't drag it all with you everywhere. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so I have found that in programming my second Unpublished recording, which is composers born in like 1870 to 1900. That's been the most challenging time period. Well, it's getting better, obviously, but like 3 years ago when I started that research, I was like, but her stuff, you know, so many of the composers. So
Yeah, I've been interested, obviously. I mean, when I was starting into Hope Kirk research, it leads to what were other women around the same time doing and what was their music like, because you're exploring, what was the cultural aspect like in the musical scene, and you start digging and you go, where do I find this? It's just hard to find. So
it's so fantastic to meet you and to know that you are covering this area. It's is so important, and that you're, other than Gary, like you're it. It's This was a woman who, I mean, she was top notch in her performing career and compositional. I assume as a pedagogue as well.
yeah, it's a shame that she's forgotten. And I mean, one thing that it also led me, since you mentioned her as a pedagogue, part of my work was, what was Hope Kirk's legacy as a teacher? What did her students do and where did her students end up? And it's a little hard to track that. I could do more research in that subject, but I found it fascinating that kind of down through the generations, a lot of us nowadays, at least in the piano pedagogy world, know the name Diane Gulkasian Rabi, um, who is an Armenian American composer now, and has written a ton of music, especially pedagogical music, but also concert music. And she studied with a student of Hope Kirk's. So kind of like a grand-student relationship, and credits Hope Kirk as being this major inspiration for her as a composer. So, when I discovered that, I was like, Hope Kirk, her legacy and her inspiration is still alive in the 21st century, It's always exciting to see that.
Fascinating. And at New England Conservatory, have you any Bible there or anything?
Can you repeat that? What was it?
Yeah, at the New England Conservatory, like, is there something there, like some archives or some collection?
I have not actually obviously been there to visit. I've looked a little bit on their library website when I was searching for Hope Kirk correspondence. I got a little bit of correspondence between her and George Chadwick and things. Maybe somewhere deep down in the records, I could find some more names of students that Hope Kirk worked with. But she only spent about 4 years there at the conservatory, and then she spent about 40 years teaching privately.
Right.
So it's, there's got to be something there, I'm sure. I should dig more.
That's a nice trip to Boston for you. Yeah. I mean, there must be something. So yeah, I think I interrupted you when we were talking about the opera. Is there something else to put in the opera?
Oh, opera, back to that. Other things that I would put in the opera. I think we've covered a fair number of things just in our conversation, but maybe I would mention, I mentioned that Hope Kirk loved Debussy. And one of the significant aspects of Hope Kirk as a concert pianist and her love of Debussy was that she was one of the primary concert pianists responsible for bringing Debussy's piano music early on to the US.
Oh.
She first, based on the programs that I found in the Library of Congress, her first performance of Debussy was in 1902 in the US, which if you think about, no, that's fairly early on in Debussy's even output. And so she loved French music in general. She premiered the works of several French composers in the US, even outside of Debussy. But I think that that was a highlight for me to discover about Hope Kirk. And just as a concert pianist in general, she had a huge repertory. Some of the critics of the time cited her repertory as being exceeded in size only by Anton Rubinstein, which is insane. I mean, that's what a critic writes, but I also saw evidence of that in the concert programs that are in the scrapbooks in the Library of Congress. Just insane memory, insane piano skills. Brilliant superstar.
Yeah. Did you come across in all those programs, did she play?
Did she play what?
Other composers that happened to be women?
Oh, most of what she played her own works. She played a lot of works by the what we now think of the classical canon of Beethoven and Chopin, and she loved Schumann and Liszt and those sorts of people. She loved French composers. She loved, she loved the music of her American colleagues. So, she explored the music of Amy Beach, for sure. That would probably be the first woman that comes to mind. It wasn't very prominent women's music per se outside of her own on her programs, but she was very good friends with Amy Beach for long term, and she loved Edward McDowell's music as well. So it's that American Boston group.
I'm just thinking that she's the exact generation as Mel Bonis and Chaminade and a little bit would be several women composing around there who were also kind of in the superstar level. So this would be interesting to know, did they know of each other?
Yeah, that would be fascinating. I didn't see most of their works present on her concert programs. I think Hope Kirk had a sort of opinion, at least she stated it in some interviews that she did. She wasn't advocating that women needed to be, I guess I would say she wasn't radical in the sense of trying to push women's composition. She just wanted to be treated equitably and fairly, and she wanted her music to be evaluated with the same level of criticism that men's music was, and not a greater sense like she felt. And so maybe that sort of moderate approach influenced her choice in programming. I'm not sure.
Well, that makes sense. All this happened, afterwards, in the early 1900s kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So been so much of an issue, right? I feel like we're more, come on, Come on, let's do this because we've lived through, society's lived through that. That wouldn't it would normal. Yeah, of course I compose.
Right, yeah.
I didn't explain it very. Yeah, it would be perspective. So you don't feel so militant as some of us now. Um, but anyway, along those lines, I'd be knowing from you what other composers who happen to be women draw you or do you feel connected with and composition.
Yeah. So most of what I've done, at least in the space of working on my doctoral dissertation in recent last year or two of exploring women composers, has really been centered on American women composers, and especially the early generations of them, along with Helen Hope Kirk. Margaret Ruthven Lang. I am, along with trying to explore some of Hope Kirk's music, trying to explore some of her music because of Margaret Lang's music, because there's some really beautiful character pieces and stuff in there that I would like to explore more of. I've recently also gotten really interested in some of the music of Marion Bauer, who was a little bit after Hope Kirk, and I'm also programming one of Bauer's, her elegy, on a recital next week. So I love some of her preludes for piano by Marion Bauer. I'm really on my bucket list of something to learn soon. So yeah.
I think I've recorded for our channel, YouTube channel, a few pieces of Bauer. I think the elegy was one of the first ones. Gorgeous, gorgeous piece. It's just a couple pages, right? I think.
Yeah, it's just 2 pages. It's quite accessible. It's easier than Hope Kirk's music.
So gorgeous. Yeah, beautiful. Have you played anything, Mary Howe?
I haven't. Should I?
Well, Erica recorded the Nocturne. Oh, and I'm just craving, like, where can we get more scores of Mary Howe's music? Um, oh, just an incredible Nocturne. So you'd love it. It's on IMSLP, so that's easy to find.
Awesome. You've piqued my interest. Okay, I need to do that.
Piano music show to YouTube. So, yeah, is there anything else that you want to share? Well, Helen Hope Kirk, etc. American.
um, I, I think we've covered most of what comes to mind initially. It's really incredible how much she did and the era in which she did it. And I would, encourage other pianists to not be timid about prioritizing exploring some of Hope Kirk's music and incorporating it in concert programs and the teaching studio, because there's some really beautiful works. It's not that every single piece that Hope Kirk wrote is something that I would go, oh, I want to play that tomorrow. A few of them may have been a little less fascinating than others, but there's some beautiful, beautiful music in there, and I'm just thrilled that I get to do this. So.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm not sure if you're seeing Antonio's comment that been really trying to get a hold of Marion Bauer's 3 impressions. Don't know if you've come across the course.
I haven't yet. Marion Bauer, I've explored some of it. I have not found those yet, but I am interested in those too. Marion Bauer is like on my next list of, when the semester ends, explore her music.
Fantastic. Oh, she's great. So people can find you not so much on Instagram, but do you have a website?
Yes. I have a website. It's just hannahrobertspiano.com. And yeah, I'm not really an Instagram user, but I'm on Facebook if
Oh,
they're
just Hannah Roberts piano or Hannah Roberts or
just Hannah Roberts, yeah. And I teach at the University of Alabama, so you can also find me online through that venue.
oh, that's a good point. Yeah, excellent. Awesome. It's just so great to hear all of this work and the enthusiasm that you share with me for Kirk. Obviously, more so because you've devoted so much time to her. And I can't wait to see more scores and more research and more.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, thank you so much. I love talking about Hope Kirk, and it's always exciting to find someone else who loves her with me. And I'm excited to hopefully provide more resources for us in the future on Hope Kirk's music. So,
Remind me the title of the piece you recorded for our channel.
Sundown.
Sundown. Yeah. So yeah, everybody go look for Hannah's performance of Sundown on Kind of Music She Wrote's channel. And next, we're going to have one more Instagram live chat, maybe even with two people visible. You never know. But going to be on Grøndal, the Norwegian composer pianist, and that talk is with Sarah Smithson. So that'll be it for a little while. After that, we'll take a little break. But yeah, I really look forward to that and hope everyone can join. And these videos live on, hopefully, on our Instagram and on our YouTube. So again, thanks for listening in, everybody, and for being flexible that all you get to see is me. But thank you so much, Hannah. It's been just a wonderful, not quite an hour, but wonderful session just to hear all your great work.
Thank you. It's been so much fun.
All right. So we'll say adios for now, and until next time. Thank you, everyone.